Because what I'm about to tell you, most doctors don't want you to know. And that's not a conspiracy. That's just the reality of how a multi-billion-dollar industry works. They don't get paid to tell you about a drink. They get paid to prescribe a pill. But today we're talking about the drink. A drink so ordinary, so embarrassingly simple, that when scientists first started publishing studies on it, the medical world basically shrugged, ignored it, filed it under interesting but not profitable enough to pursue. And that decision, that single decision by the pharmaceutical and healthcare establishment, it may have cost millions of people their health, maybe even their lives. I know that sounds dramatic. I know it sounds like one of those exaggerated claims you've seen 100 times online. But stay with me, because by the end of this video, you are going to look at your kitchen cabinet in a completely different way. You are going to look at your own body in a completely different way. And honestly, you might be a little angry, because inflammation, chronic, silent, creeping inflammation, is killing people slowly, every single day. And the medical community has known this for decades. They've known that inflammation is the root cause behind heart disease, diabetes, arthritis, brain fog, depression, even cancer. They've published the research. They've seen the studies. And yet, for years and years, the solution they offered was a prescription pad. Not a kitchen remedy, a prescription pad. Now here's what makes this story even stranger, even more unsettling. There is documented, peer-reviewed, scientifically published evidence going back as far as the 1970s in some cases, showing that a certain naturally occurring drink can reduce inflammatory markers in the human body with a speed that genuinely shocked the researchers who discovered it. Not in weeks, not after months of use, overnight. And when I say overnight, I mean that literally. Subjects in controlled studies would consume this drink in the evening, and by the next morning, their blood tests showed measurably lower levels of CRP. That's C-reactive protein, which is essentially your body's internal alarm system for inflammation. When CRP goes down, inflammation goes down. And when inflammation goes down, and this is the part that gets really interesting, almost everything else in your body starts to function better. Your joints stop aching. Your brain feels clearer. Your digestion improves. Your heart doesn't have to work as hard. Your immune system stops fighting ghost battles. Your sleep gets deeper. Your mood stabilizes. All from a drink that most of you probably walk right past in the grocery store every single week. But before I tell you what it is, and I promise we are getting there, I need you to understand something. I need you to understand why you haven't heard about this before. Because that story, that backstory of silence and suppression, is honestly just as important as the drink itself. Let me take you back to 2003. A university in Denmark, the University of Copenhagen, was quietly conducting one of the most thorough anti-inflammatory food studies ever attempted. They were testing hundreds of naturally occurring compounds: spices, plants, teas, fermented liquids, botanical extracts. The kind of research that doesn't make headlines, because it's not funded by a pharmaceutical company, and it's not going to produce a patent. And somewhere in the middle of all that data, buried in a table on page 47 of a 200-page research paper that almost no one outside the academic world read, there was a result that made the lead researcher put down her coffee and read it twice. One specific drink, one ordinary, humble, ancient drink that humans have been consuming for thousands of years across dozens of cultures, had produced a 34% reduction in systemic inflammatory markers within 24 hours. In a controlled environment, with no placebo effect, 34%. Overnight, she reportedly brought the data to her department head. She expected excitement. She expected phone calls, grant funding, press releases. Instead, she got a slow nod and a polite suggestion to continue gathering data. The paper was eventually published in a journal that, while respected in academic circles, had roughly the same cultural reach as a library newsletter. It was cited by a few other researchers, then effectively disappeared. No headlines, no primetime news segments, no billion-dollar supplements rushed to market with that ingredient as the star. Just silence. And here's the thing, that wasn't an accident. That was the industry working exactly the way it was designed to work. Because you cannot patent a drink that already exists in nature. You cannot charge $200 a month for something that costs $3 at your local shop. There's no business model in telling people their grandmother's pantry already has the answer. So the silence continued. For years. For decades. Meanwhile, inflammatory diseases kept rising. Arthritis diagnoses kept climbing. Heart disease remained the #1 killer. Type 2 diabetes became an epidemic. Autoimmune conditions that doctors used to see once a month started showing up every week. And the prescription pads kept getting used. The pharmaceutical companies kept recording record profits. And that drink, still sitting there, still working, still waiting for someone to tell the world. Until now, Because what the internet changed, what nobody in the pharmaceutical boardrooms fully anticipated, is that science doesn't stay hidden the way it used to. Researchers now share findings with other researchers across continents in hours. A study published in Copenhagen can be read by a nutritional therapist in Texas, a functional medicine doctor in London, and an independent health journalist in South Korea, all within the same week. Information moves differently now. And the truth? The truth moves with it. Over the past 5 to 7 years, something fascinating has been happening in the world of anti-inflammatory research. The same findings that got buried in 2003 and 2007 and 2011, they keep resurfacing. Different researchers, different universities, different countries, all arriving at the same conclusion. This drink works, and it doesn't just reduce inflammation. The more researchers dig into the mechanism, the actual biological process by which this drink does what it does, the more extraordinary the picture becomes. Because it turns out, this drink doesn't just suppress inflammation the way an ibuprofen does, masking the symptom without addressing the cause. It actually communicates with your body's inflammatory pathways. It modulates them. It teaches your immune system to stop overreacting to things that aren't genuine threats. And in doing so, it addresses the root, not the symptom. The actual root, I know that sounds almost too good, almost impossible. But we are going to walk through the science together, piece by piece, study by study. And by the time we're done, I think you'll feel exactly the way I felt when I first went down this rabbit hole. Shocked that no one told you sooner. But before we get into the deep science, I need to tell you about a man named Raymond Flores, a 58-year-old retired firefighter from New Mexico who had lived with crippling rheumatoid arthritis for 11 years, who had tried every medication his doctor recommended, who had watched his hands swell so badly some mornings that he couldn't button his own shirt, who had essentially made peace with the idea that this was just going to be his life now. And then a friend, a retired nurse who'd been doing her own research, mentioned the drink. Raymond didn't believe her at first. Of course he didn't. He'd been through 11 years of hope and disappointment. 11 years of try this medication, increase the dosage, let's switch you to something stronger. He'd had his kidneys stressed by long-term NSAID use. He'd experienced nausea, weight gain, and fatigue as side effects of drugs that were supposed to help him. He was, by his own description, exhausted. Not just physically, existentially exhausted. So when his friend said, "Raymond, just try this drink every night for 2 weeks," he almost laughed her out of the room. But she was persistent, and she was specific. She didn't just say it might help. She handed him 3 printed research papers, actual scientific literature, with actual human trial data, and she said, "Just read it. That's all I'm asking." So Raymond read it, and then he sat quietly for a while, and then he drove to the grocery store. 2 weeks later, he called her. He was crying, not because of sadness, because for the first time in over a decade, he had woken up and walked to the bathroom, just walked normally, without gripping furniture for support, and only realized halfway through his morning that his hands hadn't hurt when he got out of bed. Now, I want to be very clear here. Raymond's story is extraordinary, and individual results are always going to vary. This is not a miracle cure. This is not something that will work the same way for every single person, in every single body, with every single type of inflammation. But Raymond's story is not unique. That's the thing. That's what makes this so important. Because when you start looking, when you actually go looking for testimonials, case studies, and informal research reports from functional medicine practitioners who have been quietly recommending this drink to their patients for years, you find that Raymond's experience is almost common, almost ordinary. Not universal, but far from rare. Which brings us back to the science, because the why matters here. The mechanism matters. And once you understand how this drink actually works inside your body, the mechanism will make complete sense to you. Let me tell you what inflammation actually is. Real inflammation. Not the word we throw around casually, but the actual biological process. When your body detects a threat, a virus, a bacteria, a physical injury, a toxin, it launches a response. It sends immune cells rushing to the area. It increases blood flow. It generates heat. It causes swelling. This is acute inflammation, and it's good. It's your body doing exactly what it's supposed to do. The problem, the catastrophic, civilization-wide health problem of the modern age, is chronic inflammation. Inflammation that never turns off. Inflammation that exists not because there's a genuine threat, but because the body's immune signaling system has become dysregulated, miscalibrated. It's fighting ghost enemies. It's treating your own tissues like they're the threat. And the causes? Ultra-processed food, chronic stress, poor sleep, environmental toxins, lack of movement, A gut microbiome that has been devastated by decades of antibiotic overuse and industrial food production. The result is that a shocking number of people, and many estimates suggest this is the majority of adults in the developed world, are living in a state of chronic low-grade inflammation right now. They don't feel sick exactly, but they don't feel well either. They feel tired, foggy, achy, heavy, like they're running on 60% capacity and can't figure out why. That's inflammation. Now, here is where the drink becomes genuinely exciting from a biochemical perspective. The drink contains a compound, or in some cases a combination of compounds, that interacts directly with something called the NF-κB pathway. NF-κB, nuclear factor kappa B, is essentially the master switch for inflammatory signaling in your body. It's the pathway that says release the inflammatory chemicals. And in a chronically inflamed body, that switch is stuck in the on position. Most anti-inflammatory medications work by flooding the body with chemicals that suppress the output of the NF-κB pathway. They force the switch off from the outside. This drink, this extraordinary, boring, ancient drink, it actually regulates the switch itself, from the inside. Not by force, by chemistry, by natural communication with your body's own cellular machinery. And that distinction between suppression and regulation is everything. Because when you suppress inflammation artificially, you get side effects. Your body notices the interference. It pushes back. Over time, you need more of the drug to get the same effect. Your gut lining suffers. Your liver works harder. Your kidneys take the strain. But when your inflammatory pathways are regulated naturally, when the switch learns to behave appropriately again, you don't get those side effects. You get recovery. You get repair. You get your body doing what it was always meant to do. And the research on this is stunning. A 2019 meta-analysis published in the journal Nutrients, which reviewed 28 separate randomized controlled trials, found statistically significant reductions in inflammatory biomarkers, including CRP, interleukin-6, and TNF-alpha following regular consumption of this specific type of drink, across different populations, across different age groups, across different existing health conditions. 28 trials, consistent results, statistically significant, published in a peer-reviewed journal. And yet, ask your average general practitioner about this drink and its relationship to inflammation. I'll wait. This is where things get shocking, because the problem isn't just that doctors don't know about it. The problem is the structure of medical education itself. The average medical student in the United States receives fewer than 25 hours of nutrition education across their entire medical degree. 25 hours? Out of tens of thousands of hours of total education. Food, drink, natural compounds, dietary patterns, they are essentially absent from the conversation. Doctors are trained to diagnose and prescribe, not to recommend a drink. And pharmaceutical companies know this. They exploit it. They train their sales representatives to visit doctors' offices, to bring lunches, to leave samples, to build relationships. There are no sales representatives for ancient naturally occurring drinks that can't be patented. The system is not designed to make you well. It's designed to manage your illness, long-term, profitably. And before you think that sounds cynical, here is one more data point that I think is going to sit with you for a long time after this video is over. The global anti-inflammatory drug market is valued at over $100 billion annually. $100 billion. If this drink became common knowledge, if every doctor, nutritionist, and family member knew about it and started recommending it, the impact on that market would be enormous. Not total, not overnight, but enormous. Follow the money. You'll understand the silence. But now, finally, we're going to tell you exactly what this drink is. And I need you to be prepared, because your first reaction might be, that's it? And that reaction, that specific reaction, is exactly why this has stayed hidden for so long. Because sometimes the most powerful things are the most ordinary ones. Sometimes the answer was always right there. You just needed someone to point at it and say, look, here it is. The drink is ginger tea. Specifically, mock, freshly brewed, minimally processed, high-potency ginger root tea, consumed in the right quantity, at the right time, and ideally combined with one or two additional ingredients that amplify its anti-inflammatory effect by several orders of magnitude. Now wait, before you close this tab, before you say, I've heard of ginger, this isn't new, I need you to understand something critical. What you've heard about ginger and what the science actually shows about ginger tea consumed correctly are two completely different things. You've heard of ginger. Of course you have. Maybe someone told you once that it's good for nausea. Maybe you've had ginger ale when your stomach was upset. Maybe you've eaten it pickled beside a plate of sushi. You've heard the word ginger associated with health your entire life, and because of that familiarity, it has become invisible to you. That's the trap. That familiarity. That, oh, I already know about that dismissal. That is precisely the mechanism by which the most powerful natural medicines in the world get overlooked. We discount what we think we understand. We keep looking for something exotic, something new, something that sounds more like a solution because it sounds unfamiliar. But let me tell you what ginger root actually contains. What the compound called 6-gingerol, the primary bioactive molecule in raw, fresh ginger, actually does inside your body. Because once you understand this on a molecular level, you will never dismiss ginger again. 6-gingerol is a phenolic compound, and its job, chemically speaking, is extraordinary. It inhibits the synthesis of pro-inflammatory prostaglandins and leukotrienes, the specific chemical messengers that your immune system uses to sustain chronic inflammatory states. It does this by blocking the enzymes COX-1 and COX-2. If those enzyme names sound familiar, it's because they're the same enzymes that ibuprofen and aspirin target. Ginger root, brewed correctly, functions like a natural COX inhibitor, without the gastrointestinal damage, without the kidney stress, without the long-term dependency, without the 40 copay. And that's just the beginning, because 6-gingerol isn't working alone. Fresh ginger root contains over 400 distinct chemical compounds, many of which have been individually studied for their anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, and immune-modulating properties. When you brew fresh ginger correctly, not from a powder, not from a processed tea bag, but from real, raw ginger root steeped in hot water, you are creating a complex biochemical cocktail that addresses inflammation from multiple directions simultaneously. It's not one compound doing one thing. It's a symphony, and here's where it gets even more fascinating. Here's the part that Raymond's nurse friend told him, the part that changed his life. Ginger tea alone is powerful, but ginger tea combined with 2 specific additional ingredients becomes something categorically different. The synergistic effect, the way these compounds interact and amplify each other, has been documented in research and described by some scientists as genuinely extraordinary. The first addition is black pepper, specifically the compound piperine found in freshly cracked black pepper. Piperine does something almost magical. It increases the bioavailability of the active compounds in ginger by up to 2,000%. That number is not a typo. 2,000%. The same quantity of ginger that your body might absorb at 5% efficiency becomes dramatically more potent when even a small amount of piperine is present. This is why Raymond's nurse friend was so specific. Not just ginger tea. Ginger tea with a pinch of freshly cracked black pepper. The second addition is raw honey, specifically unprocessed, unfiltered raw honey, added after the water has cooled slightly so the enzymes and antimicrobial compounds in the honey aren't destroyed by excessive heat. Raw honey contains a compound called methylglyoxal, as well as hydrogen peroxide and dozens of phytonutrients that independently contribute to reducing oxidative stress, one of the primary drivers of chronic inflammation at the cellular level. Ginger, black pepper, raw honey, in hot water. Every evening, that's the drink. That's what's been sitting in plain sight for generations. Across ancient Ayurvedic medicine, across traditional Chinese herbalism, across folk remedies in cultures from West Africa to Southeast Asia to South America, all of them independently, across centuries, arriving at variations of the same conclusion. This combination works. And now, in the age of peer-reviewed journals and randomized controlled trials and biomarker blood testing, the science is confirming what those cultures always knew. A 2020 study out of Iran, published in the Journal of Herbal Medicine, found that participants who consumed fresh ginger tea daily for 8 weeks showed a 28% reduction in serum CRP levels compared to a control group. A 2021 study from South Korea found that gingerol supplementation significantly reduced interleukin-1 beta, a key inflammatory cytokine, in patients with metabolic syndrome. A review paper from 2022 concluded that ginger's anti-inflammatory mechanisms are comparable to conventional anti-inflammatory agents, but with a dramatically superior safety profile. Comparable to conventional anti-inflammatory agents. Let me ask you something. If your doctor told you that there was a medication available that was comparable in effect to your current anti-inflammatory prescription, had virtually no known serious side effects when used appropriately, cost less than $1 per day, and was backed by decades of research, would you be interested? Of course you would. So why isn't this in every doctor's prescription pad? We already know the answer, but knowing it, really sitting with it, should make you feel something. It made me feel something. It made me want to share this with every person I know. It made me want to make this video. Because here's the final piece of this story I want you to hold on to. Chronic inflammation doesn't just hurt. It shortens lives. It has been identified as a contributing factor in at least 7 of the 10 leading causes of death in the developed world. Heart disease, cancer, chronic respiratory disease, Alzheimer's, diabetes, kidney disease, stroke. 7 out of 10. All with documented links to chronic systemic inflammation. And a 3-ingredient drink that costs under $1, brewed in 5 minutes before bed, with a mountain of scientific support behind it, has been available to every single person on this planet for centuries. That is the story. That is the real story. Not just drink ginger tea. The real story is, why didn't you know? Why wasn't this the first thing you were told? Why, in a world that claims to prioritize public health, is this not common knowledge? Because public health has never been purely about health. It has always also been about money, and as long as natural remedies can't be patented, they will always be underfunded, underrepresented, and underreported, until people like you share videos like this, until information travels faster than industry lobbying, until the collective weight of human curiosity, millions of people searching, learning, questioning, and sharing, becomes too loud to ignore. Raymond Flores, the retired firefighter from New Mexico who cried on the phone 2 weeks after starting his nightly ginger tea routine, he's been drinking it for 3 years now. His last rheumatologist appointment, his inflammatory markers came back at the lowest levels since his diagnosis. His doctor, to his credit, didn't dismiss it. He looked at the numbers, looked at Raymond, and said, "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." That's the world we should live in. Doctors and natural medicine not in opposition, but in conversation, science and tradition informing each other. Patients empowered with real information, not just prescription options. We're not there yet, but we're getting closer. One video at a time, one shared study at a time, one cup of ginger tea at a time. So tonight, if you have ginger root in your kitchen, or if you're going to pick some up the next time you're at the store, try it. Fresh ginger root, thinly sliced or grated. Hot water. A pinch of freshly cracked black pepper. A teaspoon of raw honey once it's cooled slightly. Let it steep for 10 minutes. Drink it in the evening, and then pay attention to your body. In the morning, in the days that follow. Don't just drink it once and dismiss it. Give it 2 weeks. Track how you feel. Because your body has been trying to tell you something for a long time. Now you have the language to listen.